Hello everyone, welcome to CBS Beyond the Gates spoilers. New Year's Eve in Fairmont Crest is usually wrapped in glittering lights. Music polished enough to make people believe everything is under control. And congratulatory embraces calculated so carefully they can hide even the most human tremor. Shanice walked through that night as if she were stepping through a door she never should have opened, yet could no longer pretend she hadn't touched the handle. The kiss with Ted wasn't the kind of meaningless, drunken mistake people can laugh off later. And it wasn't a reckless party thrill either. It felt like a thin cut so clean you don't see blood at first, yet it keeps stinging until you realize it's deeper than you admitted. After that night, Shanice lived with the sensation of being watched by her own mind. Every time she saw Ted in a hallway, every time his name surfaced in conversation, it hit her harder than it hit anyone else. As if Fairmont Crest itself had memorized what happened and was simply waiting for the right moment to bring it back, not through gossip yet, but through an atmosphere thick with implication. Shanice never intended to speak it aloud. She kept telling herself silence was the only way to keep everything from collapsing. But the harder she tried to bury the memory, the more it rose like a shard of glass lodged in her throat. It wouldn't kill her instantly, but it made every breath feel sharp. She began to fear normalcy. She feared polite greetings, feared being alone in an elevator, feared even the way her own body remembered that moment, because what terrified her wasn't just that the kiss happened, but that it felt real in the most dangerous way. And the most unsettling truth of all was that she couldn't fully separate regret from longing, guilt from relief, or the loneliness she had ignored for too long from the sudden, reckless clarity of being wanted at the wrong time. Ashley Morgan was the only person Shanice thought might listen, without immediately turning the confession into a public trial, at least on the surface. In Fairmont Crest, Ashley carried a presence that made people feel both understood and measured. She knew how to listen like she was offering shelter, but she also knew how to let someone else's words become a weapon she could grip by the handle. Shanice chose Ashley not because she trusted her completely, but because she was exhausted. Some secrets, when you hold them too long, become poison. Shanice could already feel it spreading through her, slow and quiet. When Shanice finally began, it wasn't a full confession all at once. It was like a hairline crack in a wall, widening with every sentence, every pause, every heavy breath. She spoke of New Year's Eve without dramatics, more like someone trying to reconstruct an accident where she had been both victim and culprit. The kiss happened, it hit, unmistakable, impossible to rationalize away, and what made Shanice panic wasn't merely the act, but what followed, the sense that a boundary had been crossed. And once a boundary breaks, it can break again, especially when human weakness finds the exact seam it's been searching for. Ashley listened. She didn't rush into moral outrage or easy comfort. She let Shanice speak until the truth shaped itself clearly, then set it down like an object to be assessed. And in the precise moment Shanice saw Ashley's gaze subtly shift, she understood something cold. This secret in Ashley's hands could become leverage. Not necessarily because Ashley was born cruel, but because Ashley had a survival instinct that always hunted for advantage. In Fairmont Crest, people don't only fight over love, they fight over position, influence, and the fragile sense of safety that comes from not being the next person devoured by scandal. Ashley, however wounded she might be, however soft she could have, understood that game better than Shanice ever wanted to. At first, Ashley seemed to stand with Shanice. She emphasized how dangerous it would be if the story slipped out, reminded her how quickly this community could crush someone with nothing more than whispers, and painted the consequences for both Shanice and Ted with a frightening clarity. Yet the more Ashley spoke, the more Shanice felt cornered. Ashley didn't need to threaten outright. She simply described the fallout so vividly that Shanice frightened herself. And inside that fear, Shanice began to lose control. She started to see Ashley as the keeper of a key Simeon who could keep the door shut, or fling it open, depending on what she wanted. Ashley didn't make her move in a crude, obvious way. She did something more unsettling. She planted the feeling that Shanice now owed her for her silence. She made Shanice understand that the secret was no longer Shanice's alone, because once spoken, it gained another owner. And every owner in this world holds power over what happens next. Shanice began to spiral. Had she traded the suffocating weight of silence for something worse, someone else holding the reins? She felt relieved to have finally spoken, and terrified because she now understood that words can be more dangerous than silence. When Ashley approached Ted, she didn't charge in like a blunt blackmailer. She understood Ted, or at least she understood men like him, men trained to manage perception, to believe every situation can be controlled with the right smile, the right tone, the right script. But the New Year's Eve kiss wasn't a project to manage. It was a fault line that could split open everything Ted tried to keep intact. especially because it involved Shanice, a person he couldn't simply dismiss as an inconvenience. Ashley came at him with what he feared most, suggestion. A few carefully placed hints, a few half-finished sentences. Just enough to make Ted realize she knew. And the moment Ted understood Ashley knew, Ashley had already won half the battle. In Fairmont Crest, power wars don't require shouting. They unfold through silences that last a second too long in a meeting. Through who gets invited and who doesn't. Through proposals that pass too quickly or stall without explanation. Ashley chose her pressure point precisely. She pushed Ted into cooperating on a specific project, something pivotal. For her standing with it, making demands so outrageous he could openly refuse. She asked for what was reasonable, which made it harder for him to fight back without wondering what he might trigger. She wanted a higher role, a clear endorsement in the shifting power struggle. Ted's weight on the scale tipping her way. And she accomplished it by making Ted feel that refusing to collaborate was the same as inviting exposure. Ted slipped into a quiet, corrosive tension. He was furious at being cornered and terrified because he understood. Ashley wasn't the kind of person who simply forgets valuable information. He began to look at Shanice differently, not only as the woman he had crossed a line with on New Year's Eve, but as a weakness someone else had found. And when a weakness is discovered, people tend to react in two ways. They either protect it with tenderness, or they try to eliminate it with coldness. Ted swung between those extremes, and the instability made everything crack more easily. He wanted to hide the truth, but the more he hid it, the deeper Ashley dragged him into a web of compromise. Shanice, realizing Ashley had gone to Ted, felt betrayed in a way she wasn't even sure she had the right to name. Ashley had never promised unconditional protection. Shanice was the one who offered the secret up, and Ashley merely did what Fairmont Crest always does, turn information into power. But logic didn't stop the hurt. Shanice began questioning Ashley's motives, then questioning her own. Had she sought release, or had she sought someone else to steer her life? Ashley's pressure wasn't only verbal, it lived in presence, in looks, in timing. Every time Ashley met her eyes, Shanice felt the reminder the secret still existed. Still sat between them, and it could be pulled into daylight at any moment. Ashley achieved her goal. Ted's reluctant support was still support, and it strengthened her standing. She advanced in the ongoing struggle without declaring open war, without raising her voice. For Ashley, it was a practical victory. She gained what she wanted by using what others feared to lose. But victories like that leave marks. Ashley began to feel the air shift around her. Trust thinned. Conversations stopped when she walked in. Innocent questions carried a sharper edge. This community may be silent, but it isn't blind. People didn't need to know exactly what Ashley held, they only had to sense manipulation. And walls began rising. Meanwhile, Ted and Shanice, stringing to bury the secret, found themselves trapped in a game that slowly stripped them of control. Ted had to weigh every decision because Ashley could reinterpret anything into a threat. Shanice had to live with the fear that a single slip in expression at the wrong moment, a hesitation too visible, would give Ashley an excuse to tighten her grip. And that pressure created fractures between Ted and Shanice as well. Some days Shanice hated Ted for allowing New Year's Eve to happen, hated herself for not stopping it, and hated Ashley for turning vulnerability into a tool. Other days she hated herself most because deep down she understood the secret wasn't only the kiss. It was proof she had touched a part of her own heart she'd been avoiding. And now it was demanding payment. The atmosphere in Fairmont Crest grew heavy in a way no one could quite name. It wasn't an explosion, it was pressure building quietly. People began to look at each other as if everyone carried something that could topple the next domino. Ashley, despite her advantage, started living with a strange unease, the unease of someone holding a secret, but unsure how long it could stay contained. She knew if the kiss became public, Shanice and Ted would be the first target side. Eventually someone would wonder why Ashley always seemed one step ahead, why she benefited at the perfect moments, why she never looked surprised. She may have won a round, but she also placed herself at the center of suspicion. And in Fairmont Crest, being the center of suspicion can be more dangerous than being the center of the scandal. Shanice began to realize she couldn't survive forever under someone else's grip. She felt trapped between two fears, fear that exposure would destroy everything, and fear that letting Ashley hold the secret would destroy her more slowly. Ted, too, was worn down by the sensation of being controlled, not because he was weak, but because he had created an opening. Both of them tried to keep their faces steady, tried to preserve the illusion of normalcy. But the more they tried, the more their cracks showed. And Ashley, using those cracks to stabilize her position, accidentally created something even more volatile: Shanice's simmering desperation and Ted's restrained rage. Things held down too long don't disappear. They simply wait for the right touch to erupt. By the end, the most terrifying thing was no longer the kiss itself, but the chain of choices that followed. Shanice chose confession as an escape and opened the door to manipulation. Ashley chose leverage as a shortcut to power and invited suspicion that could swallow her whole. Ted chose cooperation to avoid a public blast, but every compromise pulled him deeper into a trap. Each of them had reasons. Each of them believed they were doing what was necessary to survive in Fairmont Crest. And that was precisely what made it suffocating when survival becomes the priority. The line between protection and destruction blurs until no one recognizes it anymore. And then, just as they convinced themselves the secret was contained to 3 people, a tiny spark fermented, the kind of spark that doesn't look like danger until it's too late. A hesitation in someone's gaze, a silence that stretched a beat longer than it should have. A moment where Ashley's confidence slipped into something too assured. As if she'd forgotten that power built on secrets always has an expiration date. No one said it aloud, but the feeling moved. Shanice felt it. Ted felt it. Ashley felt it too, even as she tried to deny it. Because the tighter you clutch a secret, the more violently it can snap free. And sometimes it doesn't break loose because of an enemy, it breaks loose because it has been held too long. When Shanice walked away from that safe conversation, she understood she hadn't just shared a story, she had handed a piece of her fate to Ashley. And as that truth settled in her chest, a single question began knocking in her mind like a midnight warning. If Ashley used the kiss to pressure Ted once, what would she demand next, and would Shanice reclaim control? Before the secret was thrown into the heart of Fairmont Crest like a bomb with no timer, Ashley came to Nicole not like someone delivering gossip for sport, but like a person who had just escaped a suffocating room, and now needed somewhere any wet breathe. In Fairmont Crest, true panic is rare because everyone is trained to keep their masks in place, to smile on cue, to make fear look like polished composure. Yet Ashley walked in with an unfamiliar rhythm to her breathing, a hesitation that made Nicole's space feel suddenly smaller, as if even the air recognized that something was about to be named. Nicole had never liked conversations that began with vagueness. She hated being placed in a waiting position, hated the way people tried to prepare her as though she were fragile. But this time, even as she wanted to cut Ashley off, instinct warned her that Ashley hadn't come for something minor. There is a particular kind of silence that appears only when something in a life is about to crack. Ashley revealed the secret reluctantly, as if she didn't fully believe she had the right to say it, yet couldn't stop herself once it started. Shanice had confessed about the kiss with Ted. A simple sentence, and yet it landed between them like a weight. Nicole felt her body react before her mind could catch up, her heart pounding harder, her throat drying, heat rising beneath her skin as if anger had found a direct route to the surface. It wasn't only jealousy, it was activation. A switch flipping inside her and pulling forward emotions she had tried to fold neatly into the private drawers of marriage, pride, and survival. In an instant, that kiss stopped being merely an act. It became a symbol of everything Nicole feared most: being replaced, being dismissed, being betrayed inside the very sanctuary she had spent years building. Rage came fast, so fast it almost stunned her. She didn't want to believe it. The rational part of her searched for a detail to disprove, a loophole to label it a misunderstanding. But Ashley's eyes gave Nicole no room to breathe in denial. Ashley wasn't speaking like someone speculating. She spoke like someone forced to carry a truth in her hands. And the more Nicole heard, the more she felt a deep, sharp ache, less like a sudden wound and more like the pain of realizing the fracture had existed for a long time, only now dragged into unforgiving light. Nicole had told herself that her marriage, however tired at times, still stood because it was built on choice and commitment. Yet a kiss doesn't need paperwork to destroy trust. It only needs to be real. Nicole turned on Ashley, and within her fury another layer surfaced, colder, sharper. She questioned Ashley not only because of the secret itself, but because of the way it had been held, weighed, and carried like something that could be managed. Nicole suddenly felt that she hadn't only been betrayed by her husband, she had been pulled into a game by her friend without ever being told the rules. Why did Ashley know and not speak sooner? What was Ashley waiting for? What advantage had she measured before deciding to come here now? Nicole didn't even need clear answers, because having to ask those questions at all made her feel humiliated. She hated the sensation of arriving late to her own life. And yet, at the same time, Nicole felt a different kind of disorientation. She wanted to shove Ashley away in suspicion, and also wanted to cling to her as a witness, a point of proof that Nicole wasn't inventing this pain. Ashley had come in search of relief, but that confession shoved Nicole into a violent internal struggle. If Nicole believed Ashley, she had to accept the brutal truth about Ted. If she refused, she would have to live with the suspicion that she was lying to herself simply to preserve a version of marriage that looked right in Fairmont Crest. And Nicole knew better than anyone else. Truth is never just truth. It is a weapon. It is currency. It is the thing that lifts someone higher or drops them lower in a blink. Nicole tried to hold her composure, but the harder she tried, the more her emotions surged in dangerous directions. She refused to become the woman who gets betrayed and then publicly unravels. BECA Fairmont Crest doesn't offer mercy. It only remembers. It remembers who trembled, who weakened, who fell apart. Nicole had lived long enough in this world to understand that one vulnerable moment could become a story that lasts for years. So she clamped down on her feelings, reminding herself she had to think, measure, and choose her next steps like a woman who would never allow herself to be reduced to a victim. Yet even that having to calculate while she was actively hurting made her angrier, as if she'd been robbed of the right to suffer in a normal, human way. Beneath it all, something more difficult stirred, something she didn't want to admit, her unresolved feelings for Ted. Anger made her want to burn everything down, to step out of the marriage and protect her pride. But years of attachment, shared memories, daily habits, and even the times she had chosen forgiveness for lesser wounds kept tugging her back. Not because she was weak, but because a marriage is not a single event. It is a lived reality. It is built out of countless ordinary days. And sometimes that ordinary accumulation is harder to break than any vow. Nicole's internal conflict intensified when she realized the news didn't only hurt, it terrified her. Terrified her that if she confronted Ted, she would hear an answer she couldn't return from. Terrified her that if Ted admitted it, Nicole would be forced to decide. And in Fairmont Crest, decisions are never only private. They come with eyes, whispers, reputations, shifts in power, silent realignments. Nicole wasn't only a wife. She was a woman living inside a social structure where every personal move is read like a statement. If she forgave him, would they see her as submissive or as strategic, holding what she considered hers? If she didn't, would they call her strong? Or would they label her a failure who couldn't keep her husband? Nicole despised having to think that way. Yet she couldn't deny it had learned how to survive under that gaze. In the end, Nicole decided she would confront Ted directly. Not because she felt ready, but because she understood that leaving this suspended would rot her from the inside. Ambiguity can be more poisonous than truth. That decision, however, made something inside her tremble. Because she knew she was walking into a confrontation where any sentence could become an ending. Nicole didn't need theatrics. She needed one thing, the truth placed where it belonged. And if it destroyed everything, then at least it would do so with clarity, not with whispers creeping behind her back. On the surface, Nicole kept the familiar posture of pride. Inside, she was bracing for a new wound or for a version of herself she might not recognize afterward. She began thinking seriously about consequences, about the next steps for her marriage. Not in a cold, pre-planned way, but in the way of someone forced to look back at everything and ask what was real, what was habit, what was love, and what was merely fear of losing face. She understood that her marriage with Ted was standing on the edge of collapse, not only because of a kiss, but because the kiss had illuminated weaknesses they both might have pretended not to see for far too long. And when Ashley finally left, leaving behind an atmosphere that felt like something had been torn open, without anyone hearing the rip, Nicole stood alone and felt one truth settle in her bones: she could no longer remain still. Yet the next step was not as simple as choosing forgiveness or choosing divorce. Because if Nicole walked toward Ted demanding truth, she was also walking toward a version of herself she had never wanted to meet. And in that exact moment when she told herself she would face him, another thought slid through her. Like a flickering light in a dark hallway, had Ashley confessed out of genuine fear? Or because she wanted Nicole to see Ted through a different lens? And if Ashley had chosen the perfect moment to speak, was there something else hiding behind that kiss that Nicole still hadn't touched?